writer and reader, and that's a very important community. I write a series of novels, so the characters appear over a series of books, and I find people, I get letters every day from readers with suggestions. The characters become real. When you create characters in a book, you give them out, and then you discover that there are people who regard this as real. They know the characters, and that forms a very valuable form of community. I had just one quick example. I had a letter from readers in New Zealand, and they said that they read my Botswana books about Mara Matsui and her husband, Mr. J.L.B. Matkoni, and they said, we read your books and we pretend to be Mara Matsui and Mr. J.L.B. Matkoni all the time.
That's a lovely compliment.
And then I had another one very quick. I know in Australia I was doing a literary lunch, and these two ladies came up to me and said that they very much objected to one of the characters in my Scotland Street books, a young man called Bruce, who's very handsome, severe, and an act narcissist. And they said, we want you to do something really unpleasant, preferably involving a steamroller.
Much like we are enjoying our conversation, and I hope you all have been enjoying it, we need to open the floor to the audience because they have a right to question as well. Yes, there. The gentleman in the orange shirt.
About interesting, if I may be so bold, the difference between conversation among women and conversation among men. I think women tend to like to talk about things that they can do something about, something in their lives. Whereas we men, on the other hand, we're absolutely not interested in talking about anything we can do anything about. Do you agree?
Who would like to take that?
I know him. That's Professor McDowell. And Professor McDowell has very valuable suggestions on all sorts of topics. He's been very modest. There is a difference in the conversation. Actually, Robert, your point's too broad.
Amanthi wants to answer that. Balli, would you like to go after that? Could you have a take as well? Okay, Amanthi.
I don't really.
It's about men and women when they have a conversation. Women talk about things that they can do, and men just talk about things, and they don't want to talk about things that they cannot do. Have I got it right?
Yeah. Well, I've got characters who do all kinds of things in my book, so I wouldn't categorise them in quite that way. Yeah, I've got pretty proactive men in my book.
How old are they, if I may ask?
Well, Gerhardt is in the 60s. And,
okay, so it's fine. It's
yeah.
not a new age thing where men solve
Actually,
problems.
may well be the younger ones that are more likely to kind of act in my books, but Gerhardt was somebody who perhaps tends to look away from the dangers that he's clearly facing. So yes, perhaps he's a bit more evasive.
Anyone else? Yes, the lady in the third row.
So I have a...
You're getting a mic.
Thank you. My name is Anubha. I'm coming in from Bangalore to attend this session, and really, really interesting. I wanted to specifically ask about censorships and how does that impact on authors, especially when they're telling stories. And I love the way you describe telling stories here. But if you could cite a couple of very actual, real examples of how you dealt with censorship or the issue of censorship, all the while understanding your muse and understanding the purpose of your writing, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
So who would like to take that? We've spoken a lot about censorship now, and how did you deal with it? Did you cut those chapters? Did you change those sentences? Or did you go ahead?
I actually cut something from this book, and it's really hard to say if it was because of censorship or it was because the book, the chapter didn't actually belong. Like that, that section when I was editing, it didn't fit. I think it was that the chapter didn't fit. It was a little bit, or that section, that moment was a little bit too long, and I needed to kind of cut back that chapter and change the pacing. But the whole time I wondered why this chapter, why this moment, because I had sort of been warned in a very coded way. This will be a problem, and we're going to make it we're going to turn society against you. Basically, we're going to say that you. So the big thing where I'm from is inciting religious hatred is kind of a big thing that no one wants to be accused of, and no one has any sympathy for anyone who does that. Because a big thing that we pride ourselves in Singapore is our racial harmony. So if I came out and said I've been censored, and then the government came out with their official statement saying, well, you were censored, we had to cut apart that, you could have caused an entire race riot, the whole country would have been up in flames because of that line that you wrote. No one would have bothered reading the passage, no one would have bothered trying to find out what it was. It would have gone, oh, well, that's unacceptable. So that was kind of where the veiled threat was, and there was this moment in the novel where I wrote something, and it was just later on that I cut it out. On one hand, I'm not sure if it was, self-censorship, if it really was, like I said, I was waiting on the chapter, but on the other hand, it was also, like you were saying, right, is it worth this fight? Is it worth the risk of igniting someone, the passions of someone who doesn't read, who doesn't understand, and who's going to set fire to a building because of, some silly line that gets taken out of context?
So
yeah.
It's also about what you were taking out, and it was not intrinsic to your whole story.
No, it wasn't intrinsic, and there were many other places where I made that point. And to be clear, like that was kind of a decoy that they were using.
Yeah.
That wasn't the issue that they had with the novel at all. That wasn't even the issue they had with religion at all. There was another aspect of it, the things about hypocrisy that I really wanted to bring into that. And they knew that they couldn't say that. They knew that no one would be sympathetic towards them if they said that, because everyone knows people, the government is quite hypocritical.
I think it's very interesting that the focus has moved from what used to be the focus of censorship, which is sexual matters. If you look at the arguments about censorship from the middle of the 20th century, for a few decades after 1950, it was all about sex, really, and people were pushing the boundaries of references to sex. And then it moved to religion, and now that's where it is at the moment. And I think your point about you have to evaluate what the point of distressing people in their core beliefs is, and if it starts a riot or causes unnecessary distress, then I think self-censorship is not alarming and is quite appropriate. You're just saying I could express views privately about my views on religion, but I don't really want to cause unnecessary distress to people.
I would say the sexuality stuff still comes into it, but it's contextualized in religion still. So there was another issue is homosexuality, right? Like another issue is not just writing about homosexuality, but writing about gay people in ways that celebrate them and they triumph at the end. They don't die miserable at the end. They're not saying, "Oh, I regret my choices," which is kind of, that's the narrative that we were given when I was growing up. So if there were homosexuals in a movie or whatever, it wasn't censored if at the end they lost somehow. But Brokeback Mountain, for example, years ago was allowed to be screened in Singapore, which everyone thought was a win, but then realized, oh, actually it's because it's quite tragic. It's tragic. Whereas things that, where homosexuals were just, living life and happy at the end were seen as a bit of a threat. And that still, though, gets connected to religion. That still gets connected to the Christian right in Singapore of, saying, oh, we don't like this is against family values, and this is a danger to our way of life.
Yes, and I suppose there are still quite a number of countries where you can't write about homosexuality. I imagine that Russia is one of those where there's that sort of pressure.
Many countries you can't write about politics, and religion is the biggest taboo. We've got a question here in the second row.
Thank you. My question is, by writing multiple novels and creating so many different characters, how far do you remain yourself? Do you become yourself a multifaceted character? Are your virtual worlds that you created swallowing you?
Well, I have about 6 or 7 series with characters who I remain in contact with virtually every year. And so I've got a whole lot of different worlds. I have to be a little bit careful I don't get them mixed up. I once had an email from my editor in New York who said, look at your latest manuscript on page 45, Mara Montesquieu has become Isabel Dalhousie. And he was absolutely right. So I think that when you're writing a sequel or a series, you enter into a universe, and you have to be aware when you sit down to write which fictional universe you're in. And do the characters swallow you up? Well, I think that would apply to any novelist. While you're writing a novel, you're living in that world, you're engaged with those characters, and they're with you. And indeed, your characters may remain with you after you've published the book. My character's with me, Mara Montesquieu is with me if I ever am tempted to do anything mean or nasty. Mara Montesquieu is there to spoil my fun. I'm just conscious of her as a moral presence.
So, are Isabel Dalhousie and Mara Montesquieu going to meet somewhere, like you have Marvel with the parallel universes? And
people often ask, readers often say, could you introduce Mara Montesquieu to Isabel Dalhousie? They also like a little boy in my Scotland Street series, Bertie, who's a long-suffering little boy who's got a dreadful mother. And they say, Mara Montesquieu would be so nice to Bertie, can't you arrange for him? And I think you can't take characters from one book and put them in another, because actually when you're writing a book, you're actually inviting the reader to suspend credulity. And it's enough of a request. And then if you start introducing fictional characters into what is meant to be the story about characters who, for the purposes of that novel, are real, you're getting into a terrible mess. And you shouldn't do it.
Amanthi, the question.
I find that fiction is a way of kind of exploring all the sides of yourself, so each character that you create can have an aspect of yourself that you want to explore in isolation. And also because when you create a character, to make them 3D, you kind of have to make them 2D, and the reader then invests in them, their own qualities. You actually can split yourself into many, many, many characters and offer certain aspect that you want to explore, but at the same time allow the reader to fill in the rest and therefore create the character for themselves. And this, I think this is what Sandy was talking about, the community of writer and reader. There is this amazing connection, right? That you kind of offer little markers for the reader to fill in and build and create the whole thing. They can create the whole house, the whole world, the furniture, everything. You just offer a little bit. And that's kind of how I see my role. It's kind of working out the little aspects in me that might be useful for characters, and then allowing the reader to do the rest.
But you lose ownership of the character. I think that's a really important thing, that authors realise that they've lost ownership of the character. The character then belongs to an extent to the readers, and so you can't have your characters doing something which the readers would regard as being highly unlikely or inappropriate. I think that's really it's a part of the moral responsibility of the author.
And that's the whole idea of the censorship, I think, that you kind of, if you're truly true to your characters and to your relationship with the reader, you really can't go wrong in a way. That's because you are offering something. And what you get is your sense of the world and this whole idea of creating community. You create a community for yourself, but at the same time you're offering to the reader something that you totally stand by.
May I just say, you've got to be very careful about bumping off your characters, because the readers don't like it. Remember Conan Doyle, when Sherlock Holmes was thrown over the waterfall? The readers were furious, absolutely furious, and he had to bring Conan Doyle miraculously back from these dangerous levels.
Balli, would you like to answer that question as well about your characters and yourself?
I think you guys spoke about it very aptly, especially you. I absolutely agree with the different facets of yourself being represented, the new things that you learn about yourself, and the ways in which readers project their own experiences. In the same way that you project your own experiences even in a simple setting, right? Like a character can walk into their house and put their coat, hang their coat up and sit in the kitchen. You will see that house in a completely different way from thousands of other readers based on houses that you've lived in, houses that you've been into. The writer doesn't actually have to give you much description. In fact, they shouldn't. They should only give you just a few, breadcrumbs, and then you just fill all of that in. So I think the same thing happens with characters as well. We just fill all of that in based on our experiences with people.
We've got this big sign saying time's up, and it's distracting. But there's one last question, if we can take from the lady here.
So censorship. Lady Chatterley's Lover was all about controlling women and was fought at the Old Bailey as a major trial, and in the end it was won. But what would each of you choose to break against censorship? Because that's the only way we can actually look at ourselves historically and look at real change. So are we controlled by the state? And where would you break out of that because you feel strongly in your characters or in the place you went to that story needed to be told?
We'll keep it short, all three of you, because then they have to get the hall ready for the next event. You want to start, Balli?
So the question is sort of what do we sort of wish for with
basically no censorship. What would you choose to put into your books that you want to discuss?
Oh, what would I choose to put into my books? Oh,
no censorship.
There were no censorship. I don't know. Now that I'm given the freedom, I don't know. I think for me the bigger priority is not so much the subjects that I want to talk about. I think it's like I said, the snake eating its own head thing. I want both sides to kind of see that their motivations come from the same thing. Like I think about this with Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows, a novel that I wrote, and also previous novels that I've written about the Punjabi diaspora community. I grew up with this very sort of conservative thing that was told to me, and this warning: don't air our dirty laundry. Never ever tell people what goes on in our house. And it was a very conservative thing. It was a very we don't share what goes on outside our family. And I've noticed over the years that on the very sort of progressive left, there's this idea as well of don't air our dirty laundry, and it's an anti-colonial thing. It's a don't let white Europeans see what immigrant communities do. Don't talk about honor killings. Don't talk about all of those things because then they'll say that we're barbaric. And both sides have kind of done that thing. I just want both sides to talk to each other and realize where the motivations are, so we can air. I think that's it. Airing dirty laundry.
Great book. That would be a bestseller.
Or it'll start a war. I don't know.
Amanthi and then Sandy quickly, because I'm getting notes.
In my case, I think it's always an internal battle to kind of to find a way to express things that I would probably prefer to keep secret, that I challenge myself to. So it's not so much that I feel that somebody's, that there is anything that is being censored, but more about finding the courage to say things, and that's the challenge. And you kind of create a little. I mean, I live in a very remote mountain village, and the sense that that's no one's reading, that you can say what you want, it's okay. And that's, I strive for that in my writing.
Sandy.
I'm sorry, I've been thinking of a piece there about titles. Bartley said that Dirty Laundry would be a wonderful title for a book. Is there one called Dirty Laundry? All the best titles are taken. And that's a real pity, because that's a jolly good title.
So 2024 GLF25, look out for a title with the 2 words dirty laundry coming from any one of these 3. Maybe I write as well, I don't know. And
Alexander McCall's this dirty laundry. That would be a good title.
so we're going to end this session here. Thank you so much, everyone.
Balli, Amanthi and Alexander will be signing copies of their book. So if you just head through that central door and turn to your left, you will come to the multi-signing area. Thank you very much.